So we are a day away before the big day, the big election, and as always, um, there won't be a video tomorrow, but hopefully we'll get one out for Friday. It might be a bit later than usual, maybe about 6ish, something like that. Depends. Again, we'll have to see. We'll have to see if I've got time, but hopefully I will put one out. So this is perfect. This perfect story. It comes from The Guardian. You know, he may be a clown, but the threat Johnson poses is deadly serious. You've only got to look across the pond to look at Trump. Trump's currently being impeached. And we don't have... Well, we do, but it's a lot harder than the American one. So... Into the article we go then. So, constantly inconsistent. Boris Johnson is faithful in at least one area, generating outrage. He does this as naturally as a dog cocks its leg at a lamppost. This week, he has used the bodies of those murdered at the London Bridge as props for his election campaign. Last week, the 55-year-old dodged a Channel 4 debate on climate change, sending instead his dad and his wingman, Michael Gove. And then there are his many columns spitting at gay men, single mums, and black people. I would go on, but equally so might you. We both know what typically comes next. The performative pearl clutching, the saucer-eyed wailing. How could he? The sound of fury on social media and rolling news, followed by a satisfied, full-bellied sentence as grateful journalists wait for the next dollop of Boris buffoonery. It passes time and it pads out columns, but it is in no way to scrutinise the man who may well be our next Prime Minister, and in charge of taking Britain out of Europe into a new era of foreign and trade relations, and rewriting our political and economic and social settlement. With the President of America strutting around London this week, the comparison is inevitable. This election, Johnson is playing the media and the public just as Trump did before claiming the White House in 2016. Both men are apt at exploiting the media. The appetite for offence over ideas, for name-calling in place of nuance. Trump calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. Johnson likes Jeremy Corbyn to Stalin. It's ridiculous, of course, but enough kindling for at least 2 days of headlines. The US president calls his counterpart in number 10 the Briton Trump. And both men have made the same calculation. The cash-strapped media needs eyeballs, and those two enjoy having all eyes on them. So they grab coverage and set the terms of the debate. If Johnson makes a show of himself, at least he's the star. When he's a car crash, websites thank him for the traffic, with the biggest UK news groups and newspapers already behind him. The Conservative leader thus ensures he gets total control of both the message from his friends and the attention of everyone else. And who cares if they call him Pinocchio? As a journalist, he made his name with tales taller than Michael Jordan. Yarns about how Brussels was designating snails as fish, or imposing a maximum size on condoms, decades before Mark Zuckerberg came along. Johnson had already gleaned the attention of the economy's golden rule. The professional reputation matters less than providing distraction. Did anyone say zipwire? This has nothing to do with appearing prime ministerial. It's about grabbing power. Like Trump, Johnson has no interest in wooing all bases. I've written here before about how the old Etonian has gone from being Heineken, the politician who reaches the parts of the electorate other Tories cannot reach, to utter Marmite. He pursues a political strategy for a polarized country that desperately seeks to divide it further by treating the other side as anti-national. If you want Brexit, or you're part of the Remainer elite, you're you want spending cuts, or you want bigger or you can bugger off to us to Venezuela. The critics are so busy fact-checking the fibs and issues, there's less time and energy to investigate the inconvenient truth. Critical arguments about his eligibility for office are sacrificed instead for coverage of his latest gaffe. Policy loses out to political etiquette. Opponents in the media become mere accomplices, and some of the most significant electoral choices of our lifetime is drained of consequence. With his plans in disarray for a disastrous hard Brexit, his statement for enthusiasm for tax cuts for the rich, and his team schooled in the dark money think tanks of the transatlantic right wing, Johnson poses a serious threat to the British way of life. The details of the Whitehall-Washington trade talks released by Labour last week make that clear. Wherever the nefarious deals from Trump and Johnson this week, everything from food we eat to the rights at our work to the state's commitment to fight climate change and chaos across the boardroom table, I'll be ready to be bargained away. Yet voters see no danger, but a clown. Focus groups told poster Michael Ashcroft last month that Johnson would most probably spend a spare Friday night shagging his secretary. There would be apologies the next morning. Boys will be boys, especially those from the Bullingdon Club. There will be less laughter if he gets in. Look at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the analysis of the Tory manifesto. Barely any coverage on the BBC or in the press. It gives the lie to those studio sofa clinchers about both parties, bleating to see who can spend the most. Instead, it calculates that Johnson's government will spend less day to day on everything outside the NHS, which is to say, crucial things such as teachers or social security or care for the elderly, than the 2010 levels, even as the fallout from his Brexit crash sucks jobs and money out of the private sector. A decade of cuts may have pushed your schools, your libraries, your councils to the breaking point, but Johnson will ensure austerity carries on well into the next decade. In their guide to this new age of autocracy, how democracies die, the Harvard political scientists Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Zabat compile a checklist titled Key Indicators of Authoritarian Behavior, intended to illustrate Trump's assault on democratic norms. It should have served as a warning of how far Johnson may dismantle the UK's own checks and balances. Do they reject the Constitution or express a willingness to violate it? The checklist begins, and one recalls Johnson's attempt to the prolongation of Parliament, and that led to the Supreme Court ruled unlawful. The ominous line in the Tory manifesto that pledges to look at the broader aspects of our Constitution. Johnson's withdrawal agreement grants him the so-called Henry VIII powers, which we've talked about on this channel before and how worrying those are, to change laws after Brexit without needing to pass a fresh Act of Parliament. As the House of Lords report shows last month shows, workers' rights and governments of Northern Ireland would be in his hands. Do they barely suggest that their rivals do they baselessly suggest that their rivals are foreign agents? Remember, Johnson accused Corbyn of siding with the Russian spin machine simply for waiting for evidence over the Salisbury poisonings. Have they threatened to take legal action or punitive action against the media? After the Channel 4 editors swapped the no-show Johnson with an ice sculpture at last Thursday's party leader debate, Number 10 threatened to review the broadcaster's licence. Were such things happening in other states, especially outside the West, our journalists would be quick to talk about autocracy. Urgent protests would pour forth from NGOs and politicians, perhaps including our own Prime Minister. Inside our borders, it's hard to find such clarity of perspective, yet the danger is visible. Johnson may be a rogue, but what should worry us is that he is a risk to our economy, society, and democracy. His bad manners should not distract from the fact he is a bad man. Treat this election as some kind of joke, and we may be laughing ourselves into the plummy-voiced, perma-smirking, tousle-head despotism. So please, for the love of God, don't let these people in. Do not vote Tory tomorrow. Vote Labour. Labour are the only party that can actually change this country for good. And if you want to vote tactically, then please make sure that your tactical vote will be worth it. And by that I mean check if your third party of choice, which was the Lib Dems, have an actual chance of getting in. Now, this could work out massively. I hope it does. But I plead and ensure that you do your homework first before you decide to do that. If you do your homework and you go ahead and vote tactically, great. But please make sure. So other than that, please get out and vote. Vote the Tories out. That's the objective of this election. We cannot let Boris Johnson continue on and the Tory policies of austerity continue, because that is what has put this country into such a state. It hasn't been the European Union, it hasn't been Labour, it has been the Tory party and their policies.